There is no evidence to suggest that Gandhi, asked Savarkar to, file this mercy petition. I actually think it's trying to delegitimize Gandhi. I don't think we can ignore Savarkar anymore. And I think the Sangh Parivar has ensured that we will not ignore Savarkar in this way.
Recently, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh had said that Veer Savarkar had filed a mercy petition with the British during his incarceration in the Andaman jail on the suggestion of Mahatma Gandhi. So we were wondering if you could maybe just, take us through the timeline, and also if, maybe we could get a fact check about this.
Yes. Savarkar is, of course, arrested in 1910 and then convicted in 1911, and then sent to the Andamans to serve 2 life sentences, which would last about approximately 50 years. And as soon as he arrives, he starts writing petitions for his release. So in 1911, he writes, in 1912, he writes, in 1914, 1916, 1918, and then there are 2 petitions in 1920. In my opinion, there's no evidence. Let's put it this way. There is no evidence to suggest that Gandhi, asked Savarkar to, file this mercy petition. Savarkar had been filing petitions as soon as he had arrived in 1911. So, I don't think that is actually a correct reading and representation. And I think it's an active, as I was saying, an active misreading as a way of trying to say that, look, Gandhi is the one who, called Savarkar brave first. So I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that it was Gandhi who asked Savarkar to write this petition. For me, when I look at the discussions that are happening with the BJP and the RSS, it's a desire to resurrect Savarkar as this brave figure. Whereas for Savarkar's critics, it's to mainly point out that he wasn't brave. And so we get into this cycle of this conversation, which to my mind is actually not a very useful discussion to have, whether Savarkar was brave or not brave, or whether Savarkar asked for mercy or not mercy, and whether Savarkar begged or not begged.
It's often said that mainstreaming Savarkar is one of the major projects of the Sangh Parivar. Why do you think that's the case?
So is it really about Savarkar's ideas at one level, or is it about sort of this kind of heroic figure who needs to be resurrected, right? And I'm sure if you that there are, if you look at sort of the names of streets, the names of buildings, the names of airports, the monuments that are being created about Savarkar, that this is a long-term process by which to resurrect Savarkar as a figure for the Sangh Parivar. But I think there's something else that's actually quite important as well, which is I don't think the Sangh Parivar today, and I could be convinced that I'm wrong, but I don't think that there is actually an intellectual figure that they can go back to, except Savarkar, right? There's Deen Dayal Upadhyay, who could be another figure, but Savarkar is the figure because he has this kind of legitimacy as this kind of anti-imperial figure that they want to celebrate, who suffered for the nation like Gandhi suffered, right? And so you have these kind of conversations about mainstreaming Savarkar, I think in part because there is no intellectual who they can go to, right? And I say that with great seriousness, that the Sangh Parivar today does not have a thinker at the level who has continued Savarkar's project in that sense. And there's an essay that Savarkar wrote towards the end of his, right before he died. And one of the things he points out is that what does the Hindu activist need to do, right, to create this Hindu Rashtra? And one of the things that he points out is they need to read books, they need to write histories, they need to create publishing houses that take seriously global ideas as well as ideas within the sort of the Indian traditions of the Indian textual traditions. And so I would sort of just leave it at that that I think the main reason that this is being resurrected is when you look at Gandhi's note that he writes, he mentions the fact that Savarkar is brave. He mentions the fact that Savarkar is a patriot. And I think this is what the BJP and the RSS would like to kind of use to sort of say, look, even Gandhi was someone who was arguing that Savarkar was brave, that he was a revolutionary, that he was a patriot. And if Gandhi is saying it, then it's a way to resurrect Savarkar's reputation, because I think it's taken, for Savarkar's critics, they've been kind of badgering the point that he was begging for mercy, which I'm less convinced by at that, to be honest. I actually think it's trying to delegitimize Gandhi in a certain sense too, right? As opposed to the other way around. I think, it's also a way of sort of saying, look, that, if that Gandhi himself was advocating that Savarkar was brave and a patriot and a revolutionary, that adds, that minimizes some of the claims of Savarkar's critics as well, right? Sure. And simultaneously, it sets up the platform for Savarkar being elevated even further, right? And I think we're going to see that as 75th anniversary comes next year, what we're going to see is that this is going to increase even further. I don't think this is going to lessen. I think it's going to continue to increase. And Savarkar, I don't think we can ignore Savarkar anymore.
In an interview that I was reading, you had said that I think that the worry for lots of people is that perhaps Savarkar is the ghost father of the nation. Perhaps India today isn't the one that Gandhi envisioned, but is moving closer to the one envisioned by Savarkar. Can you elaborate on this point a little bit?
Well, I mean, I sort of think that Savarkar is this and has been treated as this kind of figure who haunts the nation. I mean, if we sort of look at the binary between Gandhi and Savarkar, what we have today is this sense that that there's a haunting that has taken place and especially, and this is more coming from people who are critical of Savarkar's work and his ideas and his politics, right? Right. I mean, if you follow the press right around January, right in every January when Gandhi was assassinated, you begin to see a resurrection of, what was his involvement in sort of the slaying of the father? Whereas for Savarkar's supporters, there's a sense that he has been maligned or mistreated, but yet he cannot be. He doesn't occupy that same space that Gandhi does, right? But there's a desire to resurrect his reputation. And I mean, coming back to your earlier question of why why we're having these conversations about whether he was brave or not brave, is I think as one of the steps to kind of resurrecting his kind of reputation among his supporters, and to kind of emphasize that it wasn't just Savarkar, but even Gandhi was also celebrating Savarkar as this brave patriot revolutionary.